what's your name?
Well, my name is Jim, but most people call me Jim.
Blazing Saddles can be summed up in 3 words. Dare to break rules. The 1974 film was not only a box office explosion, but also a milestone in the history of American cinema when it dared to cross every limit of comedy, satire, and creative freedom. Few people know the behind the scenes of Blazing Saddles hides countless secrets. Star Gene Wilder once shared many little-known stories about this masterpiece, from terrifying filming incidents that almost caused the film to collapse to the crazy decisions of the director, such as stuffing a cloth into an actor's mouth, along with countless other shocking scenes. So what really happened behind the camera? And the 5th thing may make you unable to watch this film the same way again. 1. The terrifying incident before filming and Wilder's rescue. When Mel Brooks started filming Blazing Saddles, the role of Waco Kid had been given to Gig Young, a veteran Hollywood actor who had won an Oscar. At that time, Gig Young was the perfect choice, reputation, experience, and the seasoned look of an old gunslinger that the film needed. But as soon as the camera started rolling, something terrifying happened. On the first day of shooting, Gig Young broke out in cold sweat and spoke with stammering. At first, the crew thought he was acting, but the truth quickly came out. He was struggling with acute alcohol withdrawal. By mid-morning, Young collapsed. The camera shut down immediately. The entire film crew fell into a red alert state. There was no time for an audition, nor any possibility to negotiate a new contract. Director Mel Brooks had only one way left: call the person he trusted, Gene Wilder. The call lasted only a few sentences. Wilder did not care about the script, the salary, or what the role was. He only said one sentence: "I will come." Less than 24 hours later, Wilder was at the filming location. No rehearsal, no preparation. Wilder immediately transformed into the role of Waco Kid, as if he had known this character for a long time. The result was truly unexpected. Wilder not only pulled the film back from the brink of collapse, but also completely revived the image of Waco Kid. Under his wonderful transformation, this character became a symbol of ruthless satire, fully reflecting the chaos of the era. And it all began with a single phone call. After agreeing to join Blazing Saddles, Gene Wilder set one single condition: Waco Kid would not make the audience laugh. In a chaotic and illogical film, Wilder chose the opposite path. He decided to turn Waco Kid into a silent, sorrowful shadow, while the film carried a humorous setting. Director Mel Brooks called this character the backbone of the whole film. While Hedley Lamarr and other characters pushed absurdity to the extreme, Wilder was still like the ghost of the Old West, weary and speaking lines as dry and cold as ice. For example, when lazily lying on a bunk bed in the jail cell, Waco Kid introduced himself in a flat voice, half awake and half dazed. Instead of turning it into a cheap joke, Wilder turned that moment into a tragic scene, making the audience laugh in a haunting way. This was not just a random choice, but a masterful strategy. Wilder clearly understood that in comedy, contrast is the ultimate weapon. To make the jokes sharp, you need pauses. To make the madness reach its peak, you need a still eye of the storm. And Waco Kid was that eye of the storm. But in reality, this was an extremely risky decision. In other films, this gloomy role would usually be swallowed up by louder characters, but Wilder was a master. He calculated every expression and even counted seconds. And the result? No one could have expected a serious character to become the funniest highlight. That was the moment Wilder turned the situation around, saving the film from the risk of becoming a mess. When you understand how Wilder made the character Waco Kid the center, you will be even more curious about the surprising behind-the-scenes stories behind this character. 2. The mysteries behind the character. Waco Kid. Waco Kid was not just a humorous character. He was a legend who once never missed a shot, but now was hollowed out by alcohol, by exhaustion, and by weariness with the world. Behind the droopy eyes, behind the smirk, and the seemingly careless lines was a soul that had collapsed. A heart shattered by loneliness. While other characters rushed into satire, Gene Wilder chose a completely different path. He turned the trembling in the hand, the heavy sigh, and the lifeless eyes of Waco Kid into deep scars of psychological trauma after a life of violence and loss. Typically, when telling that he was once the fastest gun in the West, his voice carried no pride. On the contrary, it sounded like a painful confession about an unforgettable past. Why did he create such a character? Wilder understood that the most humorous characters are often the ones who suffer the most. The pain of Waco Kid never exploded, but it smouldered throughout the entire film. The question about the character's past had no answers, but Wilder planted them in the audience's mind like a ghost, making viewers wonder why had a legendary gunslinger become so degraded. This was an extremely bold acting approach because in the 1970s, comedy often celebrated loudness and exaggeration. However, Wilder proved that silence and gloom could also create laughter and touch the audience's hearts in a completely different way. That was also Wilder's acting philosophy: no grimacing, no exaggeration, no begging for laughter. He believed the audience was smart enough to find humour in the raw truth of the character. And the result was that in an illogical film, Waco Kid forever remained the greatest tragedy, a trembling hand, a weary gaze, and a painful mystery that would never be answered. But if Wilder saved the whole film with his own calmness, then behind the scenes, Blazing Saddles almost never made it to release. 3. The film could have collapsed under pressure from the studio. Although Blazing Saddles was a crazy comedy film, the behind the scenes was tense to the extreme. Warner Brothers continuously put pressure, asking director Mel Brooks to cut lines considered too sensitive and threatening to stop production. The script became the target of strict censorship. Scenes involving racial discrimination or political satire became the focus of fierce controversy, pushing the film into a precarious situation. The crew of Blazing Saddles had to face shooting days lasting 12 to 14 hours, plus the pressure of reshooting many times because of director Mel Brooks' perfectionism. Each time Brooks changed his idea, the entire set had to adjust from lighting camera to costumes, pushing the atmosphere to the peak of tension. In the midst of the chaos, Gene Wilder quietly became the one who kept the rhythm. While Brooks directed with explosive energy and too much spontaneity, Wilder acted in the opposite way. He rarely raised his voice or attracted attention, but whenever he appeared, the set seemed to have a firm anchor. During extended takes, Wilder quietly helped young actors. He showed them how to pause, how to emphasize so that each humorous line hit the mark. He performed small, delicate actions such as a nod, a gentle reminder, or an encouraging look. These seemingly trivial things significantly changed the rhythm of the scenes. According to members of the crew, Wilder was like an emotional underground director. He quietly kept the film from becoming a mess. Without Gene Wilder, Blazing Saddles might not have become one of the greatest comedy films of all time. And then, when everyone was still struggling with pressure from the studio, Wilder came up with an unexpected idea. During a break, he pulled Mel Brooks to a corner and whispered, "Live, live, live. Do you hear it? Give me my creativity." That was the starting point of Young Frankenstein, another cinematic masterpiece later. To realize these masterpieces, Wilder not only needed an idea, but also had to have a perfect team. However, when everything seemed ready, an unexpected incident occurred, pushing the whole project to the brink of collapse right before the start of filming. 4. The Dream Team and the collapse right before the G Hour. Before Blazing Saddles exploded in theatres, the name Richard Pryor was already tied to the project. Pryor was the original choice for the role of Sheriff Bart. Director Mel Brooks knew well that Pryor's raw humour and boldness could turn this character into a legend. But Hollywood did not always prioritise talent. While Pryor devoted himself to the script with sharp commentary on race and power, the executives at Warner Brothers began to worry. Fearing scandals and the fact that Richard Pryor was struggling with drugs, they made a cold decision. Number one source also revealed that Pryor had lost control while high. Once he appeared in an incoherent state, making the studio even more concerned about giving him the lead role. After Pryor was not chosen, Cleavon Little officially took on the role of Sheriff Bart. Although Little delivered a charming performance, many people could not avoid the feeling of something missing, that if Pryor had been there, the role could have reached legendary status. However, the truth was more complicated. Mel Brooks later revealed that he himself had abandoned the idea of using Pryor beforehand, and the studio only used the insurance reason to formalize that decision. Michael Schultz, a longtime collaborator with Pryor, also shared a sharply critical view. Richard wrote the script and Mel Brooks kicked him out. Although removed from the screen, Richard Pryor's mark remained like an undeniable ghost. Every line, every satirical beat of Sheriff Bart was imbued with Pryor's edginess and uncompromising style. Ironically, an actor could shape an entire film yet never appear in it. Pryor did exactly that. Blazing Saddles was a masterpiece, but its perfect version, where Wilder and Pryor together created the madness, would forever be Hollywood's greatest regret. But the strange thing did not stop there, as the set of Blazing Saddles encountered another problem from within the crew itself, forcing the director to come up with a bizarre method to make the actors keep working. 5. The crew laughed so much that the director made them stuff handkerchiefs in their mouths. Gene Wilder appeared in Blazing Saddles with a calmness that took the breath away. But behind the camera was a storm of chaos. Many of his brilliant moments were almost cut, not because he acted badly, but because the entire set laughed so much that they could not keep filming. With an unexpected style lines that seemed light but hit the humour pressure point of everyone, Wilder caused the scenes to break repeatedly. The laughter was so loud that director Mel Brooks had to run outside so that the sound would not get into the final recording. To stop the film-breaking laughter, Brooks used a humorous tactic. He handed out white handkerchiefs to the entire crew. Whoever felt like laughing would stuff the handkerchief into their mouth. If many white handkerchiefs were moving, it was a sign that the scene was going very well. This secret quality control system became Brooks's most effective laughter control tool. One of the most memorable moments was when Waco Kid encouraged Bart. "You have to remember that they are just simple farmers. People of the land, the common clay of the New West. You know, morons." This was not a planned line, but an unexpected comedic move by Wilder. It made Cleavon Little and the entire crew unable to stop laughing. The subtle mistiming, unexpected yet completely genuine, made Blazing Saddles warm in a unique way. Unfortunately, many other brilliant moments were never known to the audience. According to DVD commentary and film blog scenes that delved into the psychology exploring the origin and pain of Waco Kid were cut. The reason was to ensure the pace of the film stayed fast, not letting quiet moments break the continuous comedic atmosphere. This makes us wonder if those scenes had been kept. How much deeper could the character Waco Kid have been? Would the film have slowed down, or would it have reached an emotional level that other comedies could hardly achieve? In a film full of noise, there were moments when you could hear nothing because the crew was having too much fun. But behind those endless bursts of laughter, Gene Wilder was quietly carrying out a serious mission, protecting the soul of the film with extreme measures no one could have imagined. 6. Gene Wilder was willing to do everything to protect the script, including going against Hollywood. When Warner Brothers began to panic because of the obscene lines and the sharp satire about racial discrimination, a series of requests for cuts were made. They wanted to blunt the edge of the film, but Wilder replied, "Never." He was not a director or a producer, but he stood next to Mel Brooks as a companion from the very beginning. His stance was clear: don't retreat, don't lessen, don't let them take away the reason this film exists. In closed meetings, Wilder always encouraged Brooks to keep the sharp satirical tone. even when the studio hinted it would withdraw support. He understood the risks, but he believed that comedy must dare to make the audience uncomfortable to expose the filthy truth. Removing those sharp elements would leave the film as nothing more than an easy comedy. When the studio requested the script to erase all racial slurs or to turn the townspeople into naive characters, Wilder firmly opposed. His resistance was what made the studio waver. After the success of the producers, Wilder's voice had considerable weight, enough to make the executives hesitate. The understanding look he gave Brooks became a solid anchor, reinforcing the director's vision. For Wilder, Blazing Saddles was not just a comedy, it was a declaration of war. If the audience was shocked or offended, even better, because comedy was not born to soothe, but to expose the hypocrisy of society, from the police politics to Hollywood itself. Would the film have retained its rawness and intensity? Without Wilder, it is hard to say. Brooks had the vision, but it was Wilder who turned that vision into a fortress. In a work that broke all the rules, Wilder fought a silent but equally fierce battle. He did not shout, he stood firm. And thanks to him, Blazing Saddles survived intact to become one of the boldest comedies in American cinema history. And then, when everything seemed to be on track, an offhand remark from Wilder during a break unexpectedly ignited one of the greatest films in Hollywood history. 7. The greatest idea in history started from a casual remark. In the fiery chaos of Blazing Saddles, while everyone was still laughing, Gene Wilder quietly approached Mel Brooks. Without a script, without a grand invitation, he just blurted out a sentence between two takes. "Mel, what if the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein wanted to deny the family legacy?" At first, it seemed like a casual joke, but that sentence was the spark. An unexpected idea flared up, which would become one of the greatest comedy masterpieces in history, Young Frankenstein. However, at first, Mel Brooks ignored it. He was too exhausted and troubled with managing a project as problematic as Blazing Saddles. But Wilder did not give up. He did not shout or force the director. Instead, he quietly wrote a draft, patiently nurturing the idea. One day, when Brooks read the draft, he was stunned. The magical combination of satire, reverence, and vivid characters made Brooks realize immediately this was no longer a small idea. This was the golden idea. And in just a few days, the casual remark had turned into a real project, and Young Frankenstein began to take shape. If it were not for that chance moment on the set of Blazing Saddles, the world might never have known Young Frankenstein as it is today. For Mel Brooks, Wilder was no longer just an actor. He had become a co-architect shaping the soul and rhythm of the film. Just like the way he acted in Blazing Saddles, Wilder kept his secret weapon, restraint and emotional truth, in a sea of laughter. It was instinct that transformed him from someone acting under another's vision into the one creating that vision. After all, when both masterpieces had been created, what remained was not only roaring laughter, but also a bold cinematic legacy. Blazing Saddles still stands as proof of the power of comedy when it dares to touch what no one else dares to say. The legacy of Blazing Saddles. In 1974, the Western comedy film Blazing Saddles by director Mel Brooks was not just a theatrical release. It stormed straight into the living rooms of America like a time bomb, shattering the golden rules that Hollywood had clung to for decades. With boldness and biting satire, the film left an undeniable cultural legacy, permanently changing the way we view the comedy genre. Instead of avoiding sensitive issues, Blazing Saddles boldly placed the topics of racial discrimination, sexuality, and the hypocrisy of American society at the very center of the story. The film did not hesitate to use unsafe words, dialogue, and imagery to create bitter laughter. This boldness sparked fierce debates, but at the same time, opened the door for later dark comedies and political and social satires. The film proved that laughter could be a sharp weapon of criticism, making viewers both laugh and confront uncomfortable truths and injustices. Blazing Saddles was not only a parody of the Western genre, but also a revolution in storytelling structure. Mel Brooks broke the fourth wall, mixed historical periods, and pulled the audience out of the cinematic illusion abruptly. One of the most memorable moments is when the characters suddenly rush out of the Western film set, run into a theatre, and continue their fight. This unique style became an endless source of inspiration for many filmmakers, later such as the Zucker-Abrahams-Zucker trio with the film Airplane, or famous animated series like The Simpsons and Family Guy, which borrowed and developed this unconventional storytelling approach. Before Blazing Saddles was released, Hollywood often saw comedy as light entertainment. The film completely changed that notion, making laughter a powerful tool to criticize and question. This was an important turning point, influencing even more socially satirical works such as Saturday Night Live or The Daily Show later on. It is impossible not to mention the outstanding performances that contributed to the film's legacy. Gene Wilder, in the role of the alcoholic gunslinger Waco Kid, delivered one of the most acclaimed comedic performances of all time, impressive for its subtlety and difference from the usual loud style. Mel Brooks also reinforced his reputation as a master of parody and satire, someone who could combine absurdity and intelligence to create classics. To this day, Blazing Saddles remains a controversial work. Is it a masterpiece of genius satire, or just a product of its time with different moral boundaries? From any perspective, Blazing Saddles remains an indispensable reference whenever people talk about creative freedom and the limits of laughter. The film's legacy lies not only in awards or rankings, but in its bold challenge to the status quo, opening a new era for comedy and leaving a strong mark on popular culture. Have you ever wondered, behind the dazzling lights of the movies, what is truly being hidden? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe along with the little bell icon so you won't miss the next stories that might make you exclaim, "Really?" And if you skip it, well, I wouldn't dare guess what might happen.